Hey everyone, Coach Micah here, and welcome back to another video. Tonight is the first night of our daily debrief series. I judged 4 LD rounds today, and I can't wait to share with you what I heard in those rounds. We'll be looking over the general argumentation. However, I'm going to be showing you some of the principles from different arguments and, of course, what we can do about them, because I'm pretty sure most LD cases for this resolution fall into just a few camps, and if we can address those camps, then I think you'll be in good standing for the rest of the tournament. Tonight I am filming in the Ethos Forum. It's one of Union University's brand new buildings here on campus. It replaced the BAC, which was here last time you competed in 2024 here at Union. And let me just say, it was surreal to see that building gone. I spent many nights in that building. Anyways, without further ado, let's get straight into some of the arguments that I heard. I think a helpful way to categorize this video would be in 3 main sections. So the first thing we're going to do is start with the framework. Then we're going to be talking about the different specific arguments that I heard. And lastly, we're going to go into the aesthetics. So some of the things I saw that I really liked, or I see that people could improve on when it comes to debating style and different presentation topics and things like that. But let's get started with the framework debate. A couple of weeks ago, I released a video about how the affirmative is too weak. You can click right here to watch it. In that video, I described that there is an element missing from a lot of affirmative cases, and that is the necessary conflict. Because we have the resolution that uses the phrase valued over, you have to be able to prove how we value one thing over another thing. What does it look like to value skills over theory? The affirmatives that I had seen at the Espresso Cup tournament, for example, did not prove what that value was. They said that practical skills should be valued over theoretical knowledge, but we didn't actually know what it means to value something over. And there have actually been several cases at this tournament that I have noticed that do not do that. They do not include a resolutional analysis that shows what the conflict is. And interestingly enough, both times the negative pounced on that argument and looked at where the conflict truly was. And that is really important because the affirmative has the ability, because they speak first, to introduce that argumentation. If they don't introduce that argumentation, then the negative is going to come up and create problems for the affirmative. So if your case currently does not have a resolutional analysis that looks like that shows what happens when we value something over, how we prove value over, there are a couple ways to do it. The first is with time. The way we show valued over is by putting our time and or resources into something. Another way to show valued over is to assign value to the thing that achieves the greatest amount of good. Regardless of how much time you spend on it, regardless of what you personally think about it, whatever you witness achieve the most good is therefore what we would consider more valuable. I do think that a lot of debaters are able to easily defeat that. So time is going to be one, focus is another, another is moral foundation, or not moral foundation, but foundation. Whatever we put as the foundation of our lives counts as what we would consider more valuable. So that's just a couple ways to deal with that type of argument. And if your case does include the resolutional analysis of conflict of some sort, make sure you justify why that conflict you chose exists, but also too, make sure that you bring it through the entirety of the round. Don't forget it, refer back to it, especially if your opponent agrees to it. The second issue of framework that I keep seeing is the potential misinterpretation of a practical skill versus theoretical knowledge. And I understand people understand these terms differently, but it is not helpful to argue that theoretical knowledge is inaction whilst practical skills is action, like doing versus not doing. That's not really true in terms of what theoretical knowledge is capable of doing, right? I prefer the terms, if you're the type of person that wants to argue that, the better terms are ability versus inability. So practical skills gives you the ability to do a task, whereas theoretical knowledge does not give you an ability. So not action versus inaction, ability versus an inability. That's just a more professional and technically truer way of arguing the action versus inaction. So I would change that rhetoric there. But another key term that I think will be really important and was the crux to a particular debater's case that I saw today was the words not directly related to hands-on experiences. If you use the LIS definition of theoretical knowledge, then you'll know that phrase very well. But what exactly does it mean to not be directly related to hands-on experiences? One particular debater, and I commend him for this, when asked what it meant to be abstract, he showed that or if he believes theoretical knowledge is abstract, he said, well, abstract means you can't feel it with your hands. And I think that is really, really important, because just because something is abstract in your brain doesn't therefore mean it's abstract to the world, like it has no founding or it has no existence or it's just a crazy idea, right? Abstract just means we can't feel it, but it's in there. It's just an idea, right? But ideas can absolutely have impact. So for example, if theoretical knowledge is not directly related to hands-on experiences, it can be indirectly related to hands-on experience, which means there's still a relationship to hands-on experiences. And that is known as intellectualism. It's the idea that what you believe will impact how you behave and the actions that you take. That's basically the thesis of the moral foundation argument. We need a moral foundation because what we believe will impact how we behave, right? That's intellectualism. And that's proving that theoretical knowledge absolutely ties to what you do with your hands. It's indirectly related to hands-on experiences. It takes a couple different routes to eventually get there. To influence is the right word. It influences your hands-on experiences versus a practical skill immediately translates into an experience, while a theoretical knowledge influences your experience. So those are the framework arguments. Let's dive straight into just some arguments that I've been hearing aside from just framework, okay? So one thing that I'm seeing happen with cases is the assumption of value. And the way it works is like this. Practical skills do some valuable thing. Therefore, they are more valuable than theoretical knowledge. Is something missing from that logical syllogism? In order to prove something is more valuable, especially with a comparison resolution, you have to show how the opponent's side does not meet the same amount of value. So, for example, if practical skills does something valuable, but theoretical knowledge is unable to do that same valuable thing, then we can assume that practical skills are more valuable than theoretical knowledge because you've shown how that is. A lot of debaters are missing that step. They're either saying, well, practical skills are valuable, and that is my case. That's not helpful. Same with theoretical knowledge is valuable. That's not helpful because two things can be true at the same time. Practical skills can be valuable and theoretical knowledge can be valuable, but valuable in different ways and at different times, but they're still both valuable. So that's again why we need the resolution analysis of conflict, and also you need to show what you mean by value. You cannot just assume that because your side achieves the value that therefore the opponent's side doesn't. You have to actively show how your opponent's side does not achieve the value in order to complete the logical syllogism. So that's what I wanted to also get into as well. Incomplete syllogisms, right? A comparison resolution takes two subjects and puts them against a standard and compares them. There isn't a lot of comparing going on, I've noticed. A lot of just pro arguments for one side, and that's about it, which is fine. It's persuasive to a specific amount, but if you truly want to prove that your side is true, then you also have to prove that the other side is not true, because if two things can be true at the same time, you have to actively show proof for either. We don't want to assume, we don't want to have incomplete logical syllogism. Another thing I've noticed is unnecessary conflict. If your opponent's value sounds really close to yours, there's not really any significant reason to disagree with it. Just agree to the value. Also, if you're going to have any sort of problem with definitions or anything that your opponent brings up pre-value, replace them. I hear a lot of times where people say, oh, I am going to just add a clarification to this definition. That's wasting time. You don't need to clarify the definition. If your opponent's definition needs clarification, then it's probably too broad. And if it's too broad, say it's too broad and bring up your own definition and justify why your definition is better. That's ultimately more professional. Otherwise, it's just my word against yours. I had a debater say, my opponent's definition doesn't work, here's my definition, but didn't actually bring up a dictionary to define it. It was just his words versus the dictionary, right? That's not helpful. So don't get into unnecessary conflict. If anything, you need to have a lot more adoption. A lot of the impacts that your opponents are going to have for their cases can be adopted by your side. A lot of the goodness of practical skills exists on a negative ballot. A lot of the goodness of theoretical knowledge exists on an affirmative ballot. It's okay to adopt some of the impacts. It's also really okay in cross-examination to agree or disagree with questions. And that's the last point before I let you guys go today. The aesthetics, the cross-examination, this is the third category, aesthetics. The biggest thing that I'm noticing in my rounds, despite asking for a good cross-examination session, is the fact that cross-examination is not as fruitful as it could be. I don't think students really are utilizing the questions that they're asking, and they're getting frustrated when they're not getting the answers that they want. And it's simply because they're not asking the right question. So a lot of times I am seeing people say something like this: "You believe that XYZ, correct?" That is not how you ask a cross-examination question. You should instead phrase it to, "Do you believe that this?" And if they say yes, ask them why. Why do you believe that this is true? Give them ammunition to talk. You want to hear what they have to say because more than likely they're going to incriminate themselves, right? Do you believe this? Why or why not? Okay, so here is an example of a line of cross-examination questions that I saw in a recent debate, okay? So the debater stands up and asks the opponent, "Is advancement always a good thing?" To which the opponent answered yes. The question that followed is, okay, so is social media an advancement? And now, if you're watching this video back, you might be thinking, oh, I know where she's trying to go. She's trying to get him to say that she's trying to argue that social media is bad and that's considered an advancement, and that contradicts his statement. And that is the problem with a lot of these cross-examination questions. The whole point is you're telling your opponent where you're about to go. You need to be sneakier. And I hope to do a much more in-depth video on cross-examination in the future. But let's look at this in another way. So let's say you want to get your opponent to admit that not all advancements are good. Here's how you do that. You ask them, "Is advancement always good?" If they say yes, double down. Okay, so just to be clear, there's not one example of an advancement that is bad, just to be clear. They are either going to back their statement up and say, well, no, there are probably some examples. Okay, so advancement is not always good. Now you have gotten your admission, right? They might say, well, yes, it's not always good. That's what you wanted to hear. That's what you needed. So if you double down and say, okay, so just to be clear, all advancements are good. There's not one advancement that's bad. And he says, yes, your opponent says, yes. Then bring up an example of an advancement that was bad. So in this case, if she wanted to use social media or nuclear testing, you might ask, okay, so nuclear testing is good, right? In this case, when she tried to ask a similar question, the opponent said, no, nuclear testing is not an advancement, right? And got some brownie points there because that's a really interesting statement. Nuclear testing is not an advancement. In this case, an advancement is purely a positive thing when it's positive, right? So if you want to have good cross-examination questions, you need to stop asking, you believe this, correct? Or anytime you finish your question with correct, no go. Terrible cross-examination question. Instead, ask a yes or no question. Do you believe this? Do you believe that? Do you believe this? Do you believe that? Those are questions that you want to ask. Yes, no, maybe so, right? I believe I had one opponent or one round where, let's go back here in my notes. Let's see if I can find it. Okay. Another thing I really want to address quickly, theoretical knowledge and knowledge are not synonymous. Theoretical knowledge is a type of knowledge. It's given that's why it's called theoretical knowledge and not just knowledge. Knowledge is just information that we have observed. I know that I'm speaking to a camera right now because I can see it happening right in front of my eyes. I don't have to think about it, right? I know there's a camera in front of me. That's knowledge, right? Knowledge can be significant, so the things you know, the information you know can be significant, but theoretical knowledge is a specific type of knowledge. It's the idea of understanding the observations that I'm making. I can understand understand what the phone is doing, why it's doing it, how a phone works, all that stuff is theoretical. And theoretical knowledge is not always true. There's a lot of different theories out there where you try to understand a principle or concept that inherently is not a true principle and concept. So, opponent asked in cross-examination, theoretical knowledge is always true, right? And he was the negative. So he's trying to argue that theoretical knowledge is always true. And he asked the opponent, okay, so theoretical knowledge is always true, right? Wrong way to go about that. If he's trying to, and the opponent didn't let him have it, but he was trying to get the opponent to admit that knowledge and theoretical knowledge are the same thing. I'd recommend to not do that. If you're going to argue that they're the same thing, then argue the significance of knowledge and how it is the not only realization, but focus on the word understanding, right? It is not enough to simply know that the sky is blue, but we must understand why the sky is blue, etc. So, these are my thoughts for the day. I know it's a little less structured. I kind of ran out of time. I want to make sure I get these videos out on time for you. But that being said, these are the things that I'm seeing. So if you have any questions, then feel free to leave a comment down below. And if I judged one of your rounds, please feel free to find me at any point in time if I'm not busy or talking to one of my students and ask me for feedback. If you'd like it, of course. I take pictures of all the ballots and just so I don't forget, because it's easy at this point to judge so many rounds. So I make sure I have the information ready for you. And if you want any tips or pointers, then don't hesitate to reach out to me. Also, I am available for hire at this tournament. So for example, if you wanted a coach to watch your round and tell you how it could be better, I'm totally open to doing that. Just email me at coachmikadiaz@gmail.com and we'll work something out. Anyways, this has been video number 1 of the Daily Debrief. I hope it was useful. I will see you tomorrow evening.